Story 1. Captain Ethan Gray sat at his desk, staring at the old, weathered map of the Bermuda Triangle. He traced the jagged lines with his finger, feeling a chill run down his spine. The triangle had claimed many ships over the centuries, and countless tales of lost vessels and ghostly sightings had been passed down among sailors. But Ethan had always dismissed these stories as superstitions, until now. A week ago, he had received a distress signal from the SS Neptune, a ship that had mysteriously vanished over a century ago. The signal was faint and distorted, but unmistakable. The SS Neptune was calling out from beyond the grave. Ethan knew he should have ignored it. He had a successful career as a sailor with a fleet of ships under his command. He had nothing to prove and everything to lose. But something about the signal had gripped him, pulling him in like the tide. The SS Neptune had become an obsession, and he couldn't rest until he uncovered its secrets. The crew was uneasy when Ethan announced his decision to set sail for the Bermuda Triangle. They had heard the stories too, and many of them had families waiting at home. But Ethan was persuasive, and his reputation as a fearless captain convinced them to follow him into the unknown. As they prepared to set sail, the sky was clear and the ocean was calm, but there was an unnatural stillness in the air, as if the world was holding its breath. Ethan felt it too, a gnawing sense of dread that he couldn't shake. He tried to push it aside, focusing on the task at hand. But deep down, he knew they were heading into something far more dangerous than any storm. The first few days at sea were uneventful, and the crew began to relax. They joked about the legends of the Bermuda Triangle, laughing off their earlier fears. But Ethan remained on edge, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. He knew better than to let his guard down. On the third night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a thick fog began to roll in. It came suddenly, swallowing the ship in a blanket of white. The crew scrambled to adjust the sails, but the fog was too thick, blinding them to everything around them. Ethan stood at the helm, gripping the wheel tightly as the ship drifted aimlessly through the fog. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the creaking of the ship's timbers. Then, faintly at first, he heard it, a whispering voice carried on the wind. He strained to hear, but the words were indistinct, just on the edge of comprehension. It was as if the fog itself was speaking, calling out to him. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine, and he shook his head, trying to clear his mind. It was just the fog, he told himself, playing tricks on his senses. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The crew began to murmur nervously, their earlier bravado fading as the voices surrounded them. Some claimed they could hear their names being called, while others heard warnings or pleas for help. The fog seemed to press in on them as if it were alive, a living, breathing entity. Ethan knew he had to take control. He barked orders, trying to keep the crew focused, but the fear in their eyes was undeniable. They were losing their nerve, and Ethan knew that panic could be just as deadly as any storm. "Stay calm," he shouted over the rising whispers. "We've been through worse than this. It's just a bit of fog. We'll be out of it by morning." But even as he spoke, Ethan felt a growing sense of unease. This was no ordinary fog. There was something malevolent in the air, something that defied explanation. The ship felt as if it were being watched, as if unseen eyes were tracking their every move. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the fog began to thin. The whispers faded, and the crew breathed a collective sigh of relief. But as the fog lifted, a new horror awaited them. There, looming out of the mist, was the ghostly silhouette of a ship. It was ancient, its sails tattered and torn, its hull encrusted with barnacles. The SS Neptune had returned. The sight of the SS Neptune sent a shockwave of fear through the crew. They stared at the ghostly ship in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. It was as if the ship had materialized out of thin air, summoned by the whispers in the fog. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he ordered the crew to prepare to board the Neptune. He could see the hesitation in their eyes, but they obeyed, lowering a small boat into the water. As they rowed closer, the eerie silence was broken only by the gentle lapping of the waves against the ship's hull. The SS Neptune was massive, much larger than Ethan had anticipated. Its towering mast reached into the sky, and its decks were shrouded in shadows. The ship seemed to pulse with a dark energy as if it were alive, watching them approach. As they reached the side of the ship, Ethan climbed the rope ladder, his heart pounding in his chest. The moment his feet touched the deck, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the ship were trying to repel him. The air was thick with the stench of salt and decay, and the wood creaked ominously beneath his boots. The deck was deserted, but Ethan could feel the presence of something unseen. The whispers returned, more insistent now, echoing through the empty corridors of the ship. Ethan could see the fear in his crew's eyes as they followed him, their hands trembling as they gripped their weapons. "Stay close," Ethan ordered, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "We'll search the ship, find out what happened here, and then we'll leave. No one wanders off alone." They moved cautiously through the ship, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The ship's interior was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and darkened rooms, and every shadow seemed to hide something sinister. The further they went, the more the whispers grew until they were a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once. Ethan led them to the captain's quarters, hoping to find some answers. The door creaked open, revealing a room frozen in time. A desk sat in the corner, covered in dust with a logbook lying open, its pages yellowed with age. Ethan picked up the logbook and began to read. The entries detailed the Neptune's final voyage, and as he read, a sense of horror began to build. The crew had been plagued by strange occurrences from the moment they entered the triangle: malfunctions, sickness, and eerie sightings. But as the days went on, the crew had become increasingly paranoid, convinced that they were being watched by something unseen. The last entry sent a chill down Ethan's spine. The whispers. "They're everywhere. We're trapped. The ship won't let us go. The abyss calls, and we are lost." Ethan closed the logbook, his mind racing. The ship was cursed, that much was clear. But what had caused the curse? And more importantly, how could they escape it? Suddenly, a scream echoed through the ship, shattering the silence. Ethan and his crew ran towards the sound, their hearts pounding with fear. They found one of the crew members, a young man named Jacob, standing in the middle of a corridor, his face pale with terror. "What happened?" Ethan demanded. Jacob's voice trembled as he spoke. "I saw something. It was like a shadow, but it wasn't human. It was watching me, following me. I tried to run, but it was everywhere, in every shadow, every corner." Ethan's blood ran cold. The whispers, the shadows. The Neptune was alive, and it was hunting them. "We need to get out of here," Ethan said, his voice firm. "Now." But as they turned to leave, the ship began to shift. The walls seemed to close in around them, the corridors stretching and warping, leading them deeper into the heart of the ship. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if the ship was trying to drive them mad. Ethan's crew started to panic, their fear overwhelming them. They ran in all directions, desperate to escape, but the ship's maze-like interior only led them in circles. Ethan tried to keep them together, but the ship had other plans. One by one, his crew disappeared into the shadows, their screams echoing through the corridors. Ethan was alone, the last survivor. He could feel the ship closing in on him, its malevolent presence pressing down on his mind. The whispers were deafening now, a chorus of voices all crying out in agony. Ethan stumbled into a large chamber, the heart of the Neptune. In the center of the room was a massive, swirling void, a portal to the abyss. The ship was feeding off their fear, drawing them into the darkness, trapping their souls for eternity. Ethan knew he had only one chance. He had to confront the entity that controlled the ship, the source of the whispers. But as he approached the portal, a figure emerged from the shadows, a ghostly figure draped in tattered rags, its face twisted in a permanent scream. It was the captain of the Neptune, or what was left of him. The entity had consumed him, twisted him into a puppet to do its bidding, and now it was coming for Ethan. The captain lunged at him, and Ethan barely managed to dodge. The entity was relentless, its attacks fueled by centuries of rage and torment. But Ethan was a survivor, and he fought back with everything he had. As they battled, Ethan realized that the only way to destroy the entity was to destroy the ship. The Neptune was its anchor to the physical world, and without it, the entity would be cast back into the abyss. With a final burst of strength, Ethan broke free from the captain's grasp and grabbed a lantern from the wall. He smashed it on the ground, setting the ship ablaze. The flames spread quickly, consuming the ancient wood and filling the chamber with smoke. The entity screamed in fury as the ship began to burn, its grip on the physical world slipping away. The whispers turned into wails of despair as the portal began to close, drawing the entity back into the abyss. Ethan ran for the deck, the flames hot on his heels. The ship was disintegrating around him, collapsing into the ocean as the portal closed. He leaped into the water just as the Neptune was swallowed by the flames. The ship and its cursed crew finally consigned to the depths of the ocean. Ethan was pulled from the water by a passing ship the next morning, exhausted but alive. The crew had seen the flames from a distance and had come to investigate. Ethan's ship was nowhere to be found, and the SS Neptune was gone, leaving nothing but charred debris in its wake. Ethan was the only survivor, but he was haunted by the memories of what had happened. The whispers, the shadows, the cursed ship, they stayed with him, a constant reminder of the horrors he had faced. He returned to the mainland, but he was never the same. The sea had lost its allure, and the once fearless captain was now a shadow of his former self. He refused to speak of what had happened, the memories too painful to relive. But the legend of the SS Neptune lived on, passed down from sailor to sailor, a cautionary tale of the dangers that lurk in the Bermuda Triangle. And though the ship was gone, some said they could still hear the whispers on the wind, calling out from the abyss, searching for their next victim. Ethan knew the truth. The Neptune was gone, but the entity that had controlled it was still out there, waiting. And he knew, deep down, that one day it would return, bringing with it a new wave of terror and death. But for now, the sea was calm, and the whispers were silent. The abyss had claimed its victims, and it was content, for now. Story 2. The legend of the Phantom Galleon was known among sailors, but it was dismissed as nothing more than a maritime ghost story, until Captain John Myers decided to investigate it for himself. John was an experienced sailor and adventurer, always eager to uncover the truth behind myths and legends. He had heard the tale of the Phantom Galleon from an old sea dog in a tavern. The ship, it was said, had been cursed centuries ago after a mutiny that ended in bloodshed. The mutinous crew and their vengeful captain were condemned to sail the seas forever, never finding peace. John's curiosity got the better of him, and he gathered a small crew willing to take on the dangerous voyage. They set sail in a modern yacht, equipped with the latest technology, confident that they could handle anything that came their way. The plan was to sail through the region known as the Crimson Sea, where the Phantom Galleon had last been sighted. For days, they sailed through calm waters with nothing out of the ordinary. The crew began to joke that the Phantom Galleon was just a sailor's tale, nothing more. But on the seventh night, everything changed. A thick, unnatural fog rolled in, obscuring their view of the stars and the horizon. The waters around them turned a deep blood-red color, as if stained by some ancient curse. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the crew could see their breath in the frigid air. John knew then that they had entered the domain of the Phantom Galleon. Suddenly, out of the fog, the galleon appeared, its masts towering over the yacht, its black sails billowing in the windless night. The ship was old, its wood rotten and covered in barnacles, yet it moved with the speed and grace of a vessel in its prime. The crew stared in awe and terror as the galleon pulled alongside them, and they could see the figures of ghostly sailors on its deck, their hollow eyes glowing with an eerie light. Without warning, the ghostly crew began to board the yacht. They moved like shadows, passing through solid objects as if they weren't there. The crew tried to fight them off, but their weapons were useless against the apparitions. One by one, the sailors were overpowered and dragged onto the Phantom Galleon, disappearing into its dark bowels. John was the last one left. He fought desperately, knowing that he was no match for the spirits. Just as he was about to be taken, he spotted a way out, a small lifeboat hanging on the side of the yacht. He cut the ropes holding the boat in place and jumped in, paddling away with all his might. The Phantom Galleon did not pursue him. Instead, it turned and sailed off into the fog, vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared. John was left alone in the lifeboat, drifting in the now calm waters of the Crimson Sea. He was eventually rescued by a passing freighter, but he was never the same. The horrors he had witnessed on the Phantom Galleon haunted him for the rest of his life. He knew that the cursed ship was still out there, sailing the seas with its ghostly crew, waiting for its next victim. John tried to warn others, but few believed him. Those who did often set out to find the Phantom Galleon, but none of them ever returned. The legend grew, and the Phantom Galleon became known as the Ship of No Return, a cursed vessel that would claim the souls of any who dared to cross its path. As for John, he spent the rest of his days trying to forget what he had seen. But every night, he would wake up in a cold sweat, hearing the ghostly wails of the damned crew, feeling the cold grip of the galleon's captain on his shoulder. He knew that one day the Phantom Galleon would come for him and there would be no escape.